Hi, I want to talk about too much qualifiers before we move on because this is something that you also have to, you may want to use a lot in your program. So, and these are the signed and the unsigned qualifier when actually declaring data types. The compiler assumes by default that the variable will store both positive and negative numbers, and this will limit the range that can be stored in both directions. So it is a good idea to specify whether to sign or unsign the integer declaration. For example, say you have a range of 50 that can be used. I'm just giving you an example here. So say for example, a variable has a range of 50, then it means you can store numbers from -25 to 0. So if you have 50 range of numbers that can be stored, so what will happen is you'll be able to store from -25 all the way to +24, and that will make 50 range, of values that can be stored. So that means the maximum positive number that you can store will be 24. So even though you have a range of 50, then the maximum that can be stored is 24, and the reason is because you have allowed the program to store negative numbers. Now assume that the application you're creating doesn't have a need for a negative number. For example, you are trying to record the number of students in the class. I mean, you would not be storing -10 students, so it's not possible to have -10 or -25 students. So in that kind of situation, when you're declaring an integer and you don't have a need for negative value, for example, I'm using the number of tires on a car, you can either have 1, 2, 3, or 4. So you cannot have, or 5 if you have an extra tire, but you can never have like -5. So in that case, you do not need a negative value for that integer variable. So it is a great programming practice to use the right data type and to specify whether it is signed or unsigned. So you can always say unsigned int, then the variable name, or you can even combine qualifiers like the one we talked about before. You can say unsigned, then long int, the big number. So that means if you unsign a long integer, the number is going to be bigger because you won't have a need for the negative values. So that means all the range will be used for positive values, and this is the key. So it is optional to actually use the int keyword. You actually don't have to use this int keyword that we were using before when using a signed or unsigned qualifier. All the declaration below are all valid. So you can say short students passed. So if you want to store only the student that passed an exam, you can just, without saying short int like we discussed in the previous video, this is actually valid. It will recognize it as an integer that wants to be 16 bits. And long stars in the sky, you can say unsigned customers, signed profile lost. So these are all the keywords that you can use. So I hope you understand what I'm trying to talk about in this. So instead of having negative values being reserved for your application that you're not going to use, you might as well just use the whole range that is available to you for the positive numbers. So this is why you have to say whether you want to sign or unsigned. So if it's signed, that means it's going to be positive or negative, but if it's unsigned, that means it's only going to store the positive value. It's going to use all the total range of values for positive values. So I hope that is clear to you, and you may want to start putting that into practice. This is why it's key for you to think about what your program is going to do and the kind of data type you're going to need before you write your program, and everything will become more clear as we start to write programs, and we'll get there soon. Thank you.